Okay, hi. Just going to talk to you a little bit about Lindholme Festival last week. As you can see, the garage looks like a bomb's gone off because I spent all week trying my best to do well in the festival. Found it really interesting actually. I don't get a chance to go to Lindholme on a weekend because I have events on, like we went to France last week and all the other bits and bobs that we've got going on. So I don't find that I'm lucky enough to go there during the close season, because that's the sort of thing with my fishing. I do enjoy going to commercials, but when the river season starts and there seems to become more matches on that sort of fishing, I like to go and do that. So it's nice during these sort of 3 months to really get your head into a bit of commercial fishing. And like I've said to you before, I think doing a bit of everything helps. So I was looking forward to it because it actually wasn't fishing as well as it normally is. Lindholme is absolutely brilliant. There is so many fish in all the lakes that there's always something that you can do to catch a few fish. And I think that's why I enjoy it so much. It's not cut and dry, just going and doing one thing. However, last year in the festival, in the second festival in July, Ben Fisk won the festival, a good friend of mine. He caught shallow every day and had almost £200 every day. He had it certainly on 4 days out of 5, he had £200+ pound. And the fishing was very, very big weights based. I'm not going to say good because it's almost too good. It's not something I particularly enjoy, just sort of catching a massive weight. I like to really think about it, and that's why I quite enjoy when the weights come down a little bit. So that was interesting to me, that I thought it wasn't going to be quite as good. On the first day I drew on Oasis Lake, which you generally speaking, there's a day on each lake. First day Bonsai and Oasis were in, and I drew on Oasis. I was a little bit disappointed because I absolutely love Bonsai, so I was hoping that I wouldn't have, I was going to draw on there, but I drew on Oasis, peg 50, sort of down the middle of the straight. I didn't really fancy it too much. There was plenty of fish topping, but I think on Oasis at the moment it doesn't get fished quite as regularly, so the fish were going to be keen to see some bait. I had Ben Fisk in my section, so you know, great angler. Was always going to have a tough match against him. Very interestingly, I set up everything like I always do. I can't encourage that enough. You know, just because you've set up all your options doesn't mean you have to fish them, and this day was a classic example. I started the match short on pellets on the bottom. That's what I like to do. I use it as my tell. How's the lake fishing? Tells me how the lake's fishing. Okay, if I start in short on pellets, I can see how long it lasts. Nearly always, even in the worst possible days, there's a fish or two to be caught short on pellets. So then you know, the longer it goes on, the better it's fishing. The bigger weight, you're more likely to catch in the rest of your peg. And I really do use that a lot in my commercial fishing, sort of something that I've developed, and I really enjoy using that as a mental way to get going. I know everybody always says, oh, how can you tell which methods to fish? Well, there's a nice little one for you. So anyway, I started short, and I was just feeding not many micros, like 20 or so micros. I wasn't going nuts with bait. My plan was set a little trap, catch a fish, see how long it goes on for. Well, 3 hours into the match, I was still on it. That's the longest I've been on a line, on a short line, for 2 or 3 years. Usually, hour and a half, maximum 2 hours from one line. But no, I was still on there after 3 hours, and I was catching really well. Decent F1s, between £1 and £2. Just fishing with an expander on the hook. Did change to a hard pellet every time I caught a few little skimmers. And for me, I do it dead simply because I don't like to mess around with 2 different rigs with a banded hair rig. Good little tip is I actually just have a band, some bands on my side tray. I hook a band and put a hard pellet next to the hook. Seem to get cleaner hook holes like that anyway. But I like to fish a soft pellet for as long as I can, and I jellied them up a little bit so they were stiffer, so they weren't coming off all the time. I do like to get my hook in the pellet. That worked really well. Like I say, 3 hours in, they started to ease a little bit. It wasn't that brilliant, but I'd caught really well. Word on the bank was Ben Fisk was catching a few fish, but generally the lake was fishing quite hard. So I thought, well, that's interesting, because down this straight there's plenty of fish to be caught. So obviously in a relatively decent area of the lake, which again tells you what you can do. So rather than shipping across, I've had a little look down the edge, snuck 2 big mirrors. One was about £8, and a couple of smaller ones. And then that was starting to go a bit iffy. All the time, when I was not fishing it, I was just throwing 3s and 4s pellets. Nothing big, just keep them in the area. Now I've gone back on it, stopped throwing the pellets, tapped my little pellets in again. Again, are they there? If they're not there, then they'll soon tell me, but they were. And for the last hour and a half, I've caught 1 a chuck again. It's almost like bloodworm fishing at times. I was just lowering my bait in, it'd settle and go under within 5 seconds with an F1 on. So there was plenty of fish feeding, but more importantly, it told me I never had any signs or liners or anything in terms of up in the water. So I knew the fish weren't feeding up in the water. That was going to be a massive thing for the rest of the week. When the scales came, Ben had £129, a mega performance when you consider £80 was the, or £82 I think was the next best weight on the entire lake. But up to, you know, Ben had 129. Fortunately, I had a little bit more. I had £161. Really pleased with that. Won the lake, won the section. Perfect start to the festival. Absolutely over the moon. Some key lessons from that day, though. Some really interesting things. You know, I caught short all day, so the fish obviously were happy to come to me, come to the bait. I hadn't had any problems with fish up in the water. That means that I might be a little bit more reluctant to go shallow for the rest of the week if the conditions were to stay the same, which they did. Okay, and that's how the week moved on. The next day I was on beaches. I was next to a fantastic young angler called Ryan Wilton. Likes to talk a load of crap when he's fishing, but you know, I'm sure we all do that from time to time. But a very, very good angler. Only 18 years old, but been catching a lot of fish, and that was to prove as the week went on. He was in a bit of a bay on peg 27 on Beaches Lake, and I was in 26, which is set back. I've only ever drawn that peg once before, and that was when I qualified for Fishermania about 8 years ago. So a long time, very, very different. When I looked at it, I had an island across with some overhanging stuff, but loads of rubbish in the water. Reeds, dead bits of root. You could see it was going to be a nightmare to even get close to getting the fish out. Same down to my left. Dead roots and trees looked horrible. Looked really, really horrible. Down to my right, looks a bit clearer. Nice tree overhanging, but nothing in the water. So I fancied down there for a few fish later on, perhaps. Started my match short, like I did before. Let's see what's going on. I had £1.6, first drop in. Nice little start. And then didn't really catch a lot there. Caught a few skimmers. Couldn't catch another carp. Already I'm guessing it's going to be hard. It's going to be a completely different day. Okay. That line has told me again what to do. So I've gone along to the island, into the den. Caught a couple, lost a couple like you do because it's so snaggy. But nothing. I was waiting a long time for bites. I've come down to this left-hand side. Caught a couple. Didn't actually lose anything down there. I think I caught 3 fish. All the time, out into the open water. Young Ryan's catching really well on the long pole. Steady away, lots of carp. So I've already conceded. I haven't conceded defeat because that's not in my nature. But I think to myself, well, he's going to beat me. Just do what you can. So with 3 hours to go, I thought, right, it's really, 2.5 hours to go. It's very difficult. It's clearly very difficult. You can hear people talking around the lake, not catching a great deal. Decided to concentrate on this right-hand margin. Really concentrate, try and catch myself 10 decent carp, and then maybe I'd have a chance. I had 6 carp in the net, so I didn't have nothing in the net at all. I probably had £30, something like that, but I would say Ryan had at least 80. So when I've gone down this edge, it's been steady. First fish was a great big one, £13.10 it weighed. Then I've had a run of smaller ones, and I fished absolutely ridiculously strong tackle because of the snags. I fished a Titan 17H, 0.24 power line to an 0.21 hook length, Dura Plus 6 float, and a size 12 PR38, which is an eyed hook. Get a stronger knot of a knotless knot, in my opinion. Bunches of maggots, feeding bloodworm ground bait with Supercrush Expander. Fished a bag of Supercrush Expander and half a bag of the bloodworm ground bait. So that sort of brought it round a little bit. I don't know, it gave it a little bit extra, I felt, and the fish were coming into it really well. To put it, you know, in perspective, Ryan never had a fish down the edge, and I've caught steady there, not bagged, steady for the rest of the match. When the scales came, I thought, well, I've done all right. I've caught my 10 carp. So to go with the other carp I had, I thought I might have £100, which I was really happy about. I thought Ryan would have a lot more, but because I've been facing this way, facing away from him, I didn't realise what was going on. When the scales have come round, he's had 103 and I've had 112. So absolutely delighted to win the section again. You know, it was very, very interesting. I didn't try to go shallow. I didn't try to do it. I just knew that the fish were going to come to where they wanted to be, and they did. And that was a really, really good match for me. Next, I drew Willows. Willows is a brilliant lake. I mean, in the Fishermania, not Fishermania, UK Champs, there was like 5 weights over £200. That's scandalous fishing. Absolutely scandalous. Fantastic, fantastic fishing. So I thought, oh, it's going to be good. But based on what had been happening for the rest of the week, I thought, well, maybe it's not. Maybe it's not going to be quite as good. And it wasn't. After 3 hours, I barely had an F1 in my net. I had like 10 F1s, but I wasn't alone. Most of everybody else, especially at my end, had nothing. Further down on the point, on one of the points on 48, young Axel, who I believe fishes around Aston Park area, you know, again, good young angler, knows what he's doing. He was catching steady away. He'd already had 2 section wins and he was in my section. He was catching steady all the time, not bagging, but just steady. And of course, what's happened is, last hour and a half, the fish had come on the feed. Where did they come on? Again, on that short pole. Not up in the water, but I was ready for them. And I caught really well. I beefed all my tackle up, made my tackle a bit stronger. I thought, if I'm going to catch him up, that's my only chance I've got. And I bagged up. All I did was, every time I hooked a fish, I threw a handful of pellets in, landed the fish, went back in, and they were already there waiting for me on the pellets. And it worked brilliantly, and I caught steady away until the whistle. I was quite pleased, to be honest, because I thought I've caught really well there after having nothing up until that point. I finished up weighing £85. Axel had 101, so well done to him. He'd won the section to make it 3 wins. I was second. There was an 80 and a 70 odd, so I felt I'd done really well having that late surge. They literally caught nothing in the bay where I was, so I really was happy that I made the most of it. And having that slightly beefed up tackle meant I wasn't messing about. I really did make the most of that time. Thursday, we were on that new Lake Benny's where there's loads of small fish. Again, I drew next to young Ryan. Really fancied himself on there. Very, very good at that sort of speed fishing, if you like. But I'm no slouch. I've been fishing for roach lots of times in my life. Catching fish quickly is something that I do quite well. So I looked forward to getting involved in that. I drew in a bit of a back bay. I drew peg 48, I believe, which is like facing into this little back bay. And the lads had told me it wasn't particularly good. So rather than just go for it shallow, I was going to feed a shallow line, hopefully build that up, but try and catch a few of these smaller stockies on the bottom short. It's worked so well for me every day, why not? And that's what I've done. I've fished short, feeding the 4 mils, hooking a fish, feeding a handful of 4 mils. Few things I did to speed myself up. Never broke my pole down. Just picked the pole up, wedged the 5th section in the floor, picked the pole up, netted the fish, unhooked it, put it in the net, new bait on, shipped back out without breaking down. Saved myself a lot of time. I used an 11 hollow elastic, relatively strong, nice for that first run, but then pick them up and net the fish. Worth having a rig for slightly further out. What I did was I fished just holding my 5th section, and then they backed off a little bit throughout the day, so I just went that extra to the end of the 5th section where it was about that much deeper, a lot deeper, and I had a rig for that, and I dropped down into the deeper water and I had another good run of fish. Then I came back in later on. I was with my mate Gordon from the local tackle shop, and we both sort of clicked at the same time that maybe there'd be some fish back on the upper shelf, and there was, and I really hammered them last hour. I ended up with about 250. Between us we were trying to count, and we think about 250. And they went £90, which was enough to win the section. I was really chuffed with that. The other side of the lake, there was £300 weights, but there wasn't anybody who broke anything like that around our way, so I was really pleased. Section win, 3 section wins in the second. Other couple of anglers who were doing well had fallen away, left it all in my hands for the last day. Win my section and I'd be champion, which is easier said than done when you've got all these great anglers around you. Bonsai was our destination. As you can see, completely different fishing every day. Drew on 43, middle of that straight. It's not a brilliant area if I'm being honest. I tend to find what happens there on Bonsai is there's shoals of carp. There's always a shoal up around 69, 70 area, and then there'll be a shoal somewhere floating down the rest of the lake. When the match started, it was very clear that they weren't where I was. Started short, I had one, never had another bite. Went on my long pole, never had a bite for about 30 minutes. Tried a feeder, caught one more. Hard. After an hour and 20 minutes, I had 3 fish. Chap opposite me was catching really well. Draw next to young Ryan again. He was bagging today. The bloke next to him was bagging. The bloke opposite him was bagging. That's where the shoaler carp were. The shoaler carp had moved. And because the lakes weren't fishing too well last week, because there's been a bit of a funny... I think the fish have been spawning and everywhere's not fishing too well. There wasn't anything to catch and I was really struggling. Fortunately for me, I was the last peg in the section and the section went to my left. Now I'd heard that there was an angler catching opposite 69, so I thought, right, I just need to play calm and hopefully the fish will move back. So I plumbed up a new line towards where the carp were, started again, and after about 15 minutes I caught a decent carp, £3. Just pinging a few pellets. I was just pinging 6mm pellets, fishing a 6mm pellet on the bottom, and every now and again I'd hook a decent carp. And I started to get into a bit of a rhythm. The carp would come in to find me, and I caught really steady. I never bagged, but I just kept nicking an odd carp, and I thought, these are decent fish. You know, keep everything tidy, keep everything neat, maximise what you can catch, and if that's good enough to win your section, then great. If it's not, then fair enough. So that's basically what happened. Ryan had kept catching throughout the day, but I was catching well. I felt I was catching anglers up and doing quite well. And then with 40 minutes to go, I was thinking, I'm actually in quite a strong position. All of a sudden, nothing. 40 minutes, you'd think would be the best 40 minutes of the match on Bonsai. Completely gone. Fish were gone for me. They were gone for the angler opposite. They were starting to go for Ryan. They just pushed down a little bit. He was on the edge now. And he was nicking an odd fish, but I couldn't get a fish. And I had one small F1 with literally minutes to go. So I was a bit disappointed with that finish. I thought, oh, I'm really disappointed with that, because I thought I probably had 80+ pound, but no more than that, which is not really that good on Bonsai usually. Scales have come round and there's an 85 pound weight in the section, so I'm really nervous. I'm thinking, I don't know if I've got that. Fortunately for me, the carp were a decent stamp and they've gone £90, so just enough to win the section. I'm sure if I hadn't have just been patient, if I'd have chased around and missed out on fish, I would have had less than that. But just being patient, putting one in the net, gave me a really decent weight. So I was really, really chuffed. Really was happy that came together. Won the section and won the festival. Absolutely over the moon to win a festival at Lindholme Lakes. I think it's really hard to do with so many good anglers fishing. Dale Shepherd was second. He's a fantastic angler, especially at Lindholme. He does a lot of his time there and he's very hard to beat. Brilliant, well done Dale. And young Ryan was third. Ryan Wilton, really well done. Fished brilliantly all week. 3 wins and 2 seconds for him. Great consistent results. 2 seconds were when I'd pipped him. So hard luck, mate. I'm sure you'll definitely win one in the future. No doubt about that. No doubt about that. Well, that was a really interesting week at Lindholme. I fished the match this on the Saturday. Didn't go to plan at all. Drew on willows, which, as you can hear from what I've just been talking about, was a complete waste of time. Caught a few fish early. Then it was completely dead. Some better pegs in my section, catching a few fish. So I went to have a little wander to watch the guys on Benny's. And I watched Ben fish bag up and qualify for match this. Absolutely over the moon for Ben Fisk. Brilliant, really great performance. He committed to his method, caught all day and qualified. Brilliant, absolutely over the moon, Ben. Alright, well, if you're going fishing this week, bear in mind that it's been a bit harder. Alright, fish are spawning, they're not going nuts just yet, but they might be. They might be by the end of the week. It's talking about warming up. If it gets a bit warmer, I'll tell you now, it'll be lift off. So just watch out for that come the weekend. It might be a little bit better. Cheers.